I'm losing my voice a little bit, but it should be okay.
It'll be fine. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was oh my God, I cried a lot. Not a lot, but at some parts I cried a lot.
Yeah.
And how difficult was for you to put everything together, because you've been recording for like 10 years?
Yeah, so I filmed for about 9.5 years before we sat down and started the edit. And to be quite honest, my editor and I cut this in under 5 months. You know, we really sort of flew through it, you know, for a couple of reasons. You know, I had a pretty strong vision of what I wanted this film to be, and my editor was really fast and really amazing, and we sort of clicked right away. So yeah, we were able to get through it very, very, very quickly.
What is it about the story? Because there's so many stories like this that happen around the country. And this particular story, what was it about taking her story and putting it in and really telling what happened?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, she's my sister, so I had access to her story. Yeah. So it was like I didn't, you know, it was very easy. It was an easy ask. But I think, you know, the reason why I really pursued it and what really pushed me was that, you know, because she was my sister, because it was my family, I had an opportunity and an intimacy already ingrained in the filmmaking that, you know, I think about this film and the approaches that could have been made, and had I brought a cameraman with me, or because at the beginning I didn't know how to run a camera. I was maybe less than a filmmaker. I didn't know what I was doing at all, but I knew that if I brought a cameraman with me or a sound guy with me or producer with me, it would have changed the room and it would have changed the type of footage that I was able to get. So I thought it was important that I have that sort of intimacy ingrained, but also just the story in itself. It was an opportunity for me to tell a story that you don't normally get to see, especially when you're watching a film about, you know, mandatory minimum drug sentencing or the war on drugs in general. You know, it always focuses on the inmate and on the policy and on, you know, the politics of it. And I wanted to show you the other side of that, the people left behind and the long-lasting ramifications of these policies and these sentences. So that was what sort of drove me, was that I felt like I had an opportunity to tell something that you didn't get to see.
Yeah, but then when we start recording your nieces, but you have that in mind to create this documentary? It was just like something that you start recording with, not your phone, but with your little camera, like.
Yeah, no, it certainly did not start out as a documentary. You know, the day after my sister went away, I remember being at her house and the three girls were there, and that footage is actually in the film. You see Autumn holding a very young baby. That young baby is Annalise. You know, and they happen to have a little handy cam laying around the house, and I still don't know why, but I just picked it up and I started filming them because partly, you know, I was dealing with the emotion of my sister just being sent away for 15 years. Something in me was saying, you know, Cindy's gonna want to see her girls. You know, she's gonna want to see them grow up. She's gonna have pictures and she's going to have phone calls, but, you know, she's gonna want to see them live and run around and play. And that's how this started. I wanted to capture those moments for birthdays and holidays and milestones and different things. And, you know, I was living in New York City at the time, so I would have to fly back as much as possible to try and capture these moments. And I flew back because Autumn was having her first dance recital, and it was something that I knew Cindy wanted to be at. She really, you know, she talked about it a lot. And so I knew I had to capture it, and so I was there filming Autumn getting ready, and Cindy calls, you know, and she says that line to Autumn. She says, "Do you know what Mommy's gonna do while you go to dance? I'm gonna lay down in my bed, I'm gonna close my eyes, and I'm gonna think about you." You know, and that, you know, it tore me apart. It changed my life, literally. It was the moment I became a filmmaker. It was the moment that this became a film. It was the moment that I realized that I had an opportunity to tell a story that you don't normally get to see, and that I was going to be able to tell it in this intimate fashion. And, you know, it was right around that time that I had been doing research on Cindy's case, and I realized that, you know, her case wasn't special, that she received this 15-year prison sentence for a first-time nonviolent offense, and she was one of thousands of people facing these sentences, and that moment made me think about the children of all of those people, and the families of all of those people and the communities of all of those people who are being affected by this. And you know, I dedicated my life. I quit my teaching job, I quit acting, I quit writing, I quit everything, and I dedicated my life to figuring out how to become a filmmaker, figuring out what it meant to make this film, and you know, I was all in. So I felt, you know, it was an important enough moment and an important enough decision that I shifted the entire course of the rest of my life.
In those early conversations, when you made that shift from it being just capturing the moments to storytelling, how did you engage the other members of the family to be open and honest with you with how they're feeling? Your dad was particularly moving to me.
Yeah.
And so how do you continue the progress of the film without losing the emotion of what's happening between your sister, that it's not just a film about what's going on, but just engaging everyone?
Yeah, so it's so funny because in some ways I had done the groundwork of this film with my family prior to all of this. You know, I was an actor and a writer before all of this, and I'd actually written a one-man show called Coconut, you know, the derogatory term of being brown on the outside and white on the inside. And it was this play that I wrote about my family to, you know, and I basically, you know, let all the family secrets out in it, and it was broken up into all these monologues for each of my family members, my mother, my father, my two sisters, and my brother, and then mine at the end. And I invited them to come watch it, and it was difficult for them to watch because they were seeing all of these like family secrets and things that they didn't want to talk about, you know, unleashed to the public. And then at the end of that play, my section of it was basically saying, look, I'm acknowledging all of the terrible things that we've gone through, but I want you to know that I'm not going to just let that be. I'm the sum of all of your parts, and I'm going to make something good out of all of this. So when I decided to make this a documentary, I went to my family members individually and I said, listen, if you're willing to be open and honest and vulnerable and allow me to tell this story, I'm going to make something good out of this. I promise you that. And they knew, because I had laid the groundwork with the way I approach these stories, that I was going to do something that would hopefully do that. That was my intention. I didn't know that it was going to turn into any of this. I didn't know that it was going to get into Sundance. I didn't know it was going to get picked up by HBO. I didn't know that I was going to be sitting in this room. But I knew what my intention was, and so did they. So they trusted me. They were open. They were honest. They were vulnerable. My camera did not change the room when I came into those rooms, you know.
Through some twist of fate, have any other people who were affected at the same time your sister was, have they seen it at Sundance or any other before it goes into wide release, and have they reached out to you? Is that something you've anticipated?
As far as her particular case, or just in general?
People who have similar cases, first-time nonviolent offenses, or families who have gone through this as your family did. Have they had the opportunity to reach out, or what do you anticipate when the film goes to wide release and other families are able to see it? Yeah,
so since January, since Sundance, I've basically been on this complete tour of both festivals, you know, for the filmmaking aspect of it, but also impact tours, you know, panels, and we've screened on Capitol Hill already. I'm trying to get this to not only people who want to see it or have access to it, but to people who need to see it, you know, to affected communities. You know, it's the reason why I made the film. You know, when HBO approached me at Sundance about acquiring the film, you know, they asked me about what I wanted and what they needed to do and what this negotiation was going to be like, and I said, it's going to be very easy. You know, I want the film to be the film that we made. I don't want to change it, and I want to be able to share it with communities that need to see it. I told them I didn't make this film to make money. I made this film to make change, and they've been amazing. They've allowed me to take this film all around the world and haven't questioned me about anything. They've said, show it to the people that you feel need to show it. So I've been traveling with the film to affected communities, affected individuals, and I've, you know, received a lot of emails and texts and messages and direct messages and phone calls for people who are saying thank you. Thank you for representing the people left behind and sharing this story and making an impact. So it's been amazing.
It's a public service.
Yeah, and you know,
and then it's not just for the people. I think I don't have this case in my family, for example.
Yeah.
But that hits me really hard because I'm an immigrant and I'm also a mother.
Yeah.
And then I cannot imagine not to participate in some of these songs.
Yeah.
That's your sister, like it wasn't
Yeah.
participating with the girls.
Yeah, and I think part of the, you know, one of the big choices I make in the film is to not make it a real political film,
Right.
not make it an issue-driven film in the sense that I'm putting up, you know, stat cards and like really bombarding you with all this information. I tried to make a human story that can relate in cross-party lines and relate to anybody in this country. I wanted people to see their father in my father, or see themselves in my father, or see my mother in their mother, or see, you know, and I tried to make it as relatable as possible by telling just a human story, and that's again one of the big reasons why the approach to the film is unique and the intimacy is unique. You know, there isn't a portion of this film where it's the camera, the lens isn't in my hands. You know, I never wanted it to feel like you were watching a family. I wanted you to feel like you were a part of the family. That's why I chose the lenses that I chose. I chose the approach that I chose to document it this way, because I wanted you to be on the inside of this. So it's, you know, and I think because of that approach and the way we put it together, you know, we're affecting people who are directly affected by these laws, but also other people. And I think that's the real challenge, and that was the real hope. You know, I didn't want this to be a film that just preached to the choir, because what good is that? I wanted it to be a film that, you know, reached outside of those lines and allowed people to see that even though you're not personally affected, you're affected and you're connected to this larger ecosystem that is creating these problems.
Is it bittersweet to, or what is your feeling? How would you describe it to reach this level of success with a project that you created, but at the same time with such a tragic event that happened to your family? How do you balance that kind of justice?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly bittersweet to, you know, that, you know, it isn't, you know, this is my directing debut for a reason. You know, I've had the great fortune of becoming a cinematographer and shooting films for other really great directors and producers, and films that have gone on to do really wonderful things. And I have had other opportunities to direct films in the past, but I would politely decline or sort of figure out a way to not do it, because I knew that I was making this thing that was going to be my vision and my heart, and I wanted it to represent who I was as a storyteller. So, you know, I guess if the question was, would you trade the success of the film and the what it is sort of already doing for my career and those things to not have this happen to your sister? And yeah, without a doubt. You know, but in the same respect, like, in some ways I'm happy that it happened to me, because I don't know, like, I've had the opportunity to share it and use it in a way. It's happening to a lot of people, and I think, you know, a lot of people are making films about their loved ones, and there are a lot of films, like, you know, throughout the course of the 9.5 years when I was going to these protests and speaking in DC and doing all of these things, there were many cameras, there were many filmmakers following many people just as passionate, and I consider myself lucky to have figured out a way to tell the story and have it be amplified on such a large platform. So, you know, I would certainly trade the grief that my family has gone through for any of this, and on the drop of the hat. But, you know, I also feel like sometimes things happen for a reason. And
so you feel, because this is what you, and it comes out in the documentary, that it's almost like you're handed a mantle. Somebody gave you the baton and said, hey, do something. Do you see change coming in this? Do you see things happening where the direct result from what you've done, you're seeing this change in what
I do see change happening, but that may be that may be because I'm just hopeful to a fault. You know, and that's been my process from the beginning of this. You know, when I started making this film, I was immediately, I was immediately met with, you know, cynicism. You know, that film's already been made. Nobody wants to see that film. Your sister's never going to get out. Like, this is too big. Who are you? And I'm sorry. And I could have easily given up and taken those no's as maybe I'm not the right person. But I took the other approach and I said, maybe I am the right person. Maybe nobody's approached it the way I'm going to approach it. And I'm going to not give up hope, and I'm going to take these, the cynicism not as no's but maybes, and I can turn those maybes into yeses. And when we look at our current, especially our current administration in Washington, there's a lot of cynicism about, will there ever be change within this administration? And I understand why, and I understand why people feel like there isn't going to be change. But to me, I haven't been told no. I haven't been told that your film isn't going to affect people's hearts and minds, that your film isn't going to bring about change, and that we don't want to see this film. So far, I've been met with a lot of acceptance. The first person to call me after we premiered at Sundance was a Republican senator from Utah. And everyone's like, a Republican senator is calling you. And Senator Mike Lee got in touch and he said, thank you for making this film. I'm passionate about criminal justice and sentencing reform, and I'd love to bring it to Capitol Hill. So Senator Mike Lee and Cory Booker from New Jersey, in a bipartisan effort, brought the film to Capitol Hill because we needed to show people there, this is a human story, not a political story, but a human story that will transcend politics and change hearts and minds. So do I think it can affect change? I think it can. I think it is. Do I think that there's going to be change? I'm hopeful that there will be. And until somebody tells me no, I'm going to tell you yes. We're going to create change. That's a promise I made to my family. That's a promise I made to my sister, that I was going to do everything I could to make something good out of this. And until they shut me down, I'm going to keep pushing.
I think that's where there's an inspiration for other Latinos who see what you do to pick up a camera and tell their stories.
Yeah.
Where before those many no's that you've heard, they're probably getting the same no's, and they're saying, hey, maybe I can do the same thing.
Exactly. And I think, that's one of the underlying messages in this film as well. On paper, let me just wipe my nose, I'm sorry. That's one of the underlying messages of this film, because, I say this sometimes when I'm introducing the film. On paper, this film has taken over a decade to make, and that's true. But it's something that's been boiling up in me for much longer than that. Growing up, I felt very disenfranchised. I felt overlooked. I felt like my community was overlooked, and I feel like we often sit around and wait for some policy change, or wait for somebody to come and say, let's do this. Let me hear your voice. Let's figure out how we can make change. And that voice never came. That person never came. And when my sister, I remember sitting in that I remember sitting in that courtroom and hearing my sister receive this 15-year prison sentence, and thinking and looking around the room and saying, is anyone going to say anything? Like, is anyone going to fix this? And it hit me in the gut, and it said, no, nobody's coming. Nobody's going to say, let's hear your voice. And I realized I had to be a voice. I had to give that voice. And we, as Latinos, as disenfranchised people in this country, we can no longer wait. We have everything at our disposal now to be a voice and to have a voice, and we can't sit around and wait for it anymore. I hope that people take that from this. I was not a filmmaker when I started this film. I didn't know a single thing about filmmaking. And you fast forward to a decade later, and I'm winning the audience award at the Sundance Film Festival. There are narratives and ways that people were trying to introduce me when this all first started happening, and they would say, here's this guy who came from nothing, who came from and has done this thing, and I would quickly correct them. And I would say, don't say I come from nothing. I may not come from wealth. Yeah, I didn't have experience. I may not have come from wealth or privilege or anything like that, but I come from love, and I come from passion, and I come from heart, and that's all we need, and we all have that in us. We just need to spark that, and we need to engage young people in and remind them, remind them of the importance of their voice and what it can do. So I hope I'm one of many people who are going to take this on and continue to push.
Yeah, are you already thinking, and I know maybe it's too early for that, but are you already thinking another subject for your next documentary?
Yeah, you know, throughout this process, I've become a filmmaker in my own right, and I've made a lot of projects and made a lot of films, and you know, despite what this film is and what this interview is, you know, I live in this one half of the world where I make these social, political commentary, long form narrative documentaries, and the other half of my world is I'm a comedy writer and producer and director, and I balance those two things, sort of balance in my head, and I'm trying to find ways to bring those two things together. I think in any great tragedy there needs to be levity, and you see this in this film. There are many comedic moments, you know, you need that. I use it as a defense mechanism, and in any great comedy it's grounded in some truth, you know, and I'm trying to continue to be a voice. I'm trying to not allow myself to be boxed into a certain genre. I think I owe it to myself. I think I owe it to other people who are trying to do the same thing as me, to not allow myself to be boxed in, to just tell one kind of story, but to transcend genre and have a voice in all aspects of media. I think that's the only way we're going to rise up and we're going to continue to be a powerful voice, is if we don't box ourselves in and we explore as much as we can. So I'm hoping to continue to be a voice, and I'm fighting to continue to be a voice. So yeah, I hope so.
Going through this trajectory with your nieces, has it sparked an interest in them in filmmaking or criminal justice or becoming lawyers, or any of the three girls? Has it sparked that in them after living through this?
Yeah, you know, Ava, the middle one, my middle niece, over the course of the years, you know, literally any time I went home, from the moment my feet touched down in Michigan to the moment I left, I had a camera in my hand and I was filming everything that was going on. And there would be times when I would come home and she would say, or she wouldn't even say, Adam, her dad would usually be like, hey, look at this thing that Ava did. And she would make these little movies on her phone, and she would do these, and they're actually really funny and really good. And he was like, I think she, you know, sees what you're doing, and she sees all the other stuff that I make, the comedy and the other films, and, you know, she was inspired, I think. So I think she has sort of a knack for it, and I hope that she continues to pursue it. But Autumn, the oldest, you know, I think she's starting to come into her own as to what her voice is, and she's starting to do some panels and starting to speak to other people and speak to audiences of children whose parents are incarcerated, and she asked me one time, you know, what do I say? What are they going to ask me? And I said, my best advice to you, Autumn, is don't worry about what they're going to say or what they're going to ask you. You're not a politician. You're not a lawyer. You are somebody who has a PhD in something that you can't go to school for. They want to hear what's in your heart and what you've experienced. And I said, what is it that drives you? What do you want to get across to people? And she said to me, you know, the youngest two, Anna and Ava, were really young when Mommy went away. You know, they don't really have memories. Anna certainly does not. Ava, you know, was 2 when Cindy went away, so she doesn't really remember. She said they don't really remember Mommy being home. She said, I was 4. I remember Mommy being home, but most importantly, I remember Mommy not being home. And she said, I don't want other kids to feel that. So that's why she wants to share her story. She wants to help other kids. She wants to prevent this from happening to other kids. You know, that feeling that she has is going to be with her for the rest of her life, and probably affect the rest of their relationships for the rest of her life. And, you know, it's important that she's recognizing that and wanting to share it. So I think that she has a really bright future ahead of her, and, you know, I'll never force her into anything, but I told her if it's something she wants to pursue, I'll do everything in my power to help her. So, yeah, you know, it remains to be seen what they're going to do with their lives, but I think this will play a big part in it.
We have time for one more question.
Ultimately, once the film's released, where do you see it going next? because it's good enough to be nominated for an award easily.
Yeah. I don't know where it's going to go next. I hope that when it's widely released, that it's released in a large enough fashion that the right people are able to see it. That we, again, it's not a political film, but it's a hearts and minds film, and it's a film that I hope makes people think about and research more about what is causing this. I think it's going to affect people, and I think the more people who are knowledgeable about this, hopefully it helps spark a change. I think it's going to be, I hope that it's at least a small part of this larger movement that's happening. There are a lot of people working for sentence reform, for criminal justice reform, and all of these things. And I made the film, on purpose, in a way that all of these other organizations who have been working for 30 plus years can use this film as a tool to amplify what they're doing as well. I don't think that it's ever going to be a single thing that makes change. I think it's going to be a collection of a lot of people finally saying we've had enough. I've screened this film at the Civil Rights Museum a couple of days ago, and before we screened, they took me on a tour, and I watched this disenfranchised population in the 60s and 70s laying it all on the line and making the ultimate sacrifice, some of them, for change. And my fear is that we don't have that in us anymore as a country, and I get very disheartened by being invited to a protest or a rally or something and seeing on the flyer that it ends at 8 o'clock. Protests don't end at 8 o'clock. It can't be a flash in the pan. It can't be these little things that we do. It's a movement, and it's something that we have to collectively buy into as a society if we're going to make any change on this. So I hope that it's a small part of that larger collective consciousness of us no longer being okay with people profiting off the backs of poor, disenfranchised, mostly brown and black people. We can't be okay with that anymore, and I hope it plays into that larger narrative.
Will you ever go back and revisit this in future years? Do you ever feel that?
Yeah, I right away people were like, you have to keep filming because this is the real story, her coming home. And I said, no, not right now. I've asked so much of my family for a decade, and also myself. Holding this camera during this process forced me to be separated from them emotionally in a lot of ways, and I just want to spend time with them, especially now. But I do think, my idea is if Autumn or Ava or Anna decide to take this on in their adulthood and I want to follow that, I have this backstory and this footage that can help support what they're doing in the future, and I want to see what this does to an individual, what this happening to somebody during the most crucial part of them growing up, being without a mother, how that's going to affect them in the future. And that's something that I may visit later on down the line, but right now I don't have any plans. I want to sort of let my family live a little bit without me, sitting in front of them with the camera.
That's good. Awesome. Thank you.